Unbelievable, or maybe believable, knowing this team this year as the West Virginia Mountaineers lose 24-3. And really, it wasn't even that close as WVU gets shellacked on a day they honor superstar Major Harris, retiring his number 9. And he had to watch that one as the Mountaineers offense putters around and just cannot get going. This is a WVU postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I am going to be joined by a fellow WVU alum, a fellow U92 WVU FM alum, and also a Heisman voter, or at least he was a Heisman voter. I'll see if he still has his Heisman vote. Yes. Okay, so still Heisman voter, Chris Sedenka of 96.3 in Portland, Maine. Chris, thanks for joining me. And again, as I told you off the air, my apologies that we have to discuss this game as the Mountaineers did lose and lose pretty badly.
Yeah.
I normally do ask the initial takeaways. Obviously, they can't be good, but I guess, what are your feelings now in terms of your takeaways after this game from what you thought entering the game? The Mountaineers had been playing better entering this game. Obviously, this is the number 11 team in the country that actually, if they went out and would beat Oklahoma a couple times, they actually now, based on what happened around the country, would have an outside shot at the playoff. So it wasn't going to be easy. But there were some people that thought WVU could hang in there if Deggy would have one of those good days he has had recently. But then this was just about as bad as it could possibly get.
It was tremendously disappointing to watch, especially after the last two games, as you mentioned. I mean, you look at those last two, and, I think you saw a lot of progression with this offense and maybe something that you could consider a good offense and a balanced offense. And
right.
And Deggy was comfortable, and he had two really good games. And also, too, you saw better play calling in those two games. And I don't think it's that surprising to see that correlation when you're winning. But today was just an unmitigated disaster. A lot of credit, obviously, to Oklahoma State. And on the broadcast, they're right. That is a better defense. I think them saying that it might be the greatest defense they've seen this year might be a bit of a stretch, right. But it's a good squad. They're very athletic, and they absolutely destroyed West Virginia's offensive line. And then on top of that, Deggy clearly just wasn't comfortable. I thought Dan Orlovsky pointed out a couple really smart plays that he had, Sam James on one, and he had Winston Wright on another, where you just make the pass, man. You got to trust your guys. You got to trust your route. And he just wasn't there. I mean, Deggy just wasn't comfortable all day. And it was like a failure. It was just like a total system failure today. You can't get the ground game going. They're either throwing short or they're trying deep. And so, I mean, you can't have a deep game against this offense or this defense if you don't bang them up a little bit. He had no time for a deep game. So, yeah. And then on top of that, if this doesn't say what the day was, they take a delay of game before punting because they thought the fourth quarter, the quarter was going to run out before. And lo and behold, no. And now you're putting your punter deeper in the end zone. I mean, that was just such a great symbol of what the day was. So yeah, really disappointing. I don't think if you're a West Virginia fan, you should be like mad or I think you should just be disappointed at an effort you didn't expect today. I'm not saying you should have expected to beat this team. This is a good, like you said, I mean, this is an Oklahoma State team that is going to be flirting in the top 10 now, especially I assume Michigan State ended up losing that game. The last time I looked at it, I think they were down by 2 scores with about 10 minutes to go. So, I mean, Oklahoma State's in really good position. So I'm not saying we should be sitting here and thinking, oh, this is a definite win, but that's not a performance you want to see.
Yeah, and Michigan State still 6 minutes left right now.
Still a lot of time though.
Playoff lies, but they are down by a couple scores as we're on this post-game show here live. Chris Sedenka joining me of 96.3 in Portland, Maine. The Mountaineers, 24-3. I don't even know if the score paints the picture because it almost felt like, to the atmosphere around the stadium, Jarrett Deggy's body language, Neil Brown's body language, everyone there really at halftime was just, this isn't going to be our day. And then just kind of going through the motions the rest of the game. Who do you blame the most, though, for this? Because I don't think anyone thought WVU was going to win this game, but I do think there were some people. It almost even sounded like Dan Orlovsky and the rest of the ESPN crew on the broadcast maybe thought they could have at least competed better in this game. And yeah, there's the debate of this being such a great Oklahoma State defense. If they would take care of business the rest of the season, this could be arguably the best team WVU has faced all year, with Oklahoma right now having that honor. But WVU played right with Oklahoma, who, yeah, maybe some could argue they're overrated, but they've been scoring against everyone else except for the Mountaineers. They face this Oklahoma State defense, and they can just do nothing else. Is it more about Oklahoma State's defense being too much? Or again, is there just a piece of the pie to toss around here? And who do you blame more for what West Virginia could not do?
I mean, it's pie pieces. You're right, Mike. It always is. But I think when you look at, like, what can you control? And obviously, Oklahoma State knows how to go after the quarterback. They've got numerous guys who are on that front that can just decimate an offensive line. And I thought the game plan, and maybe the game plan changed, right? So, and things change all the time, as we know. But I think you look at the game plan of what you had, trying to break it with screens that always seem to be jumbled up, or Daggy was afraid to throw. Or again, you're looking down the field. That's just a really difficult offense to go against a good front. They were getting sacks with 3 guys. And so it's hard not to look at game plan and offensive line. I know the easy thing is that everyone wants to pile on Daggy. I get it. I mean, he's the quarterback. I'm sure he gets it. We all get it. Right. And it was pretty evident too, after the fumble that Greene had, that was going to be Daggy's game for a while. Like, you knew that was probably going to get Greene on the sideline for a while. And I'm not saying that should be the case, but it felt like one of those college things, like,
yeah.
But so
we will get there. We will get there.
I'm sure. Yeah. And so, I'm not saying that you can't look at it. And again, like you said in the broadcast, they pointed it out. You look at numerous passes that Daggy's got to hit. Some of those sacks are definitely on him. He's got to get rid of the ball or throw it away. I know that's something that he's always struggled to do. Spencer Sanders, by the way, the same way. Now, neither of these guys are guys who are in Brock Purdy too. None of these guys like to throw the ball away. So It's kind of interesting to watch. But again, this offensive line got absolutely decimated. They couldn't run the football either. They basically, I don't even know if they gave up on the run. They just never really had, I don't think, a very good strategy. And you saw it early, the 3rd and 1 on the first drive of the game. They run a really slow kind of delay run to the left side, and it gets blown up, lose 3 yards. You got to kick the field goal. And man, you feel like right there, it's like, okay, we need to, we clearly are not going to out beast them in the front. And I just never really saw that changing. The offense, just as a whole, I don't think you saw the best game from the wide receivers either. And ultimately, man, did they let down this defense today, because the West Virginia defense put up a performance that, like, 24 points doesn't tell the story about how good that defense played.
The West Virginia defense has earned a couple more wins.
I mean, they were so dead tired at the end of that game. They had just no business still being on the field.
Yeah, this game, the defense played better than what the score will show. The defense really played better, and the score showed it against Oklahoma, even a couple other times this year. The defense actually played really well last year after scandal. The defense has been underrated for a couple years now, but the offense has not nearly been good enough to have it really matter. Unfortunately, Chris Sedenka of 96.3.
The climb is not happening right now, Mike.
The climb is not occurring at all here. Chris Sedenka, 96.3 NWU alum, joining me on this West Virginia postgame show. 24-3 losers to Oklahoma State as they continue their season with plenty to look forward to. We'll see what the Mountaineers have to look forward to, because now even a postseason at all right now is incredibly in jeopardy, if that really even matters at this point, which we will get to. Daggy, 15 for 22. Man, 15 for 22, 68.2, 109 passing yards. I should have had you guess the total. An interception, and he was sacked 7 times. The quarterback rating, which shows you maybe how this stat should be viewed overall, still at 100, which actually is above average, which not an above average day for him, as you saw a quarterback.
Though I will say the college rating is a little bit higher than the NFL rating.
So, that's true, but that's still not as horrendous as you would think today was. And Dan Orlovsky, who had a great college career, say what you want about the NFL, a quarterback, did talk about the missed passes and the missed looks that Daggy had in this game. So I think he was the perfect color guy to have in this game too. And Jarrett Daggy has been up and down throughout his career, but had been good recently. recently Iowa State, you could argue, was the best game he's played at WVU, and then turns around and offers this effort here. So for me, I do think Deggy wasn't nearly good enough. The offensive line, though, as you mentioned, was so bad that I don't know if it would matter. And Deggy is a quarterback that he needs weapons to perform. He needs protected. He's not going to carry you through. He can manage a game and be okay and maybe do a little bit more if he gets everything else to work around him. Everything else around him just did not click in this game. The offensive line also did not allow Lady Brown to do anything, only 24 yards on the ground. It was just a really bad day for the offensive line, which then can compound and make it bad for the quarterback. And we'll get to Neil Brown here in a second. I don't know if it was his best day either, although he's had a few of those blunders that you mentioned in terms of clock management or knowing his surroundings earlier this year, taking timeouts with him while trailing, either into the half or even in the fourth. Just weird things here. So I got to ask you two more questions while I have you here. And these are just questions that are going to be discussed by anybody that's a fan of this program. And I'd also imagine, as this was brought up on the broadcast, one of these, as we're speaking, Neil Brown is speaking to the media. We're going to have that on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now. And I'd imagine getting asked this and going to be having to answer this. He's been dancing around it in many of these press conferences to this season. Number one, we saw Garrett Greene throw a couple passes in this game. You mentioned the miscue that basically did end his day. Prior to this game, he had been sprinkled in some games. Not last week, basically not utilized at all. Granted, it was an upset win for the Mountaineers. There's been conversation. There's been social media talk. There's been people saying, hey, if you're not going to get into a bowl game, you might as well see what you can get. Then there's been Neil Brown, who's kind of basically a nice way of saying he hasn't shown me enough as a passer in practice to warrant being out there because he can't just be a runner. You can't do the Major Harris thing in today's college football in the Big 12. I get it. But now, if you're really looking at a bowl game being very unlikely and you are planning for the future, is it now time for you to, at the very minimum, see more from Garrett Greene, even if that means embarrassing yourselves in some games and getting totally blown out? If not having him start, would you be done with Deggy for potentially the Deggy era? Or do you still want to ride it out, try to crawl into the bowl game? Because I'd imagine he's still better for you, knows the offense more than Garrett Greene. And then we'll talk about the climb here in a minute as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think he'll change. I think that he'll start Deggy for the year. I do. And
I agree with you. I think that's clear. But what about you, though? What would you do?
Yeah, and just quickly about that, and what's interesting, I guess the way that I would look at it is, I mean, I probably would have already gone to Greene, but if I was still with Deggy now, especially after that performance, I would tell Greene to be ready for Kansas State. I mean, that is his next game, right? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't think it's the Texas. Yeah,
no,
you're right.
State. So, it's Kansas State, then it's Texas.
Yeah, I'd be ready. I would start Jarrett. I have no problem saying, like, hey, Jarrett, here's your chance. Let's forget about Oklahoma State. You played great against Iowa State, played perfectly fine, especially, in a managing game against TCU.
We have seen it. Maybe you could say the offensive line wasn't good. Okay.
Let's not forget. I mean, I think all bets are off for next year. I don't think this team, I don't think they want to start, assuming Marquio signs, I don't think he wants to start Marquio as a true freshman. So next year, I mean, Deggy could come back. Garrett Greene could be that guy.
He could.
There are 1,000 weird scenarios that I don't think most West Virginia fans like, but you have to assume that, like, some of these are still on the table. So
doesn't it almost feel like, though, that if this team doesn't win any more games, and I guess Kansas is a win, you imagine they're half, but say they don't make a bowl game the rest of this year. Yeah, because they need 2 more victories. They got 3 more left. You're imagining Kansas has 1, so they're going to have to beat Kansas State or Texas. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them are ranked. They both are winnable games. They've actually kind of owned Texas in recent years. But if this is the Mountaineer effort, they could easily lose both of those games, and Texas has at least 4 teams. Mountaineers have not been scoring this year. So again, nothing is guaranteed. If they're not going to make a bowl game this year, really, even if they do, it almost feels to me, based on what we've been hearing from Neil Brown, because a lot of this is our opinions, but also what we know he's going to do. We've been around long enough that not only do we know he's going to start Deggy the rest of the year, probably, Greene is not a quarterback that can win the job in practice. That's the problem.
I agree.
That's why he hasn't started to this point.
I agree, Mike.
Neil Brown has said, basically, without saying, that he's not showing me enough as a passer in practice. So if that's the case and he doesn't play more in these games, even if he doesn't start, even in mop-up duty, then there's a 0% chance he's winning it in camp in the summer. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
So
and they clearly don't have a like a two-man rotation that's set. They have it's just sprinkle, like you said, it's a sprinkle in here and there. And honestly, like no one wants to see two quarterbacks, man. Like two quarterbacks is never a great sign for your program.
No. True. That's true, except for I think I wouldn't mind seeing it if it was a 4-win team looking at the best case scenario of the toilet bowl.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a great question. Like if you lose to Kansas State next week, I understand you have 2 games left. It's so interesting because, this team obviously wants to play for a bowl. So sitting on 4 wins definitely makes it a much more difficult decision, I am assuming, for Neil Brown here, because he's got to sit there and be like, all right, listen, I know I got a better chance, at least in my mind, with Daggy, but to your point, Mike, Greene's going to win the job by going out there and doing some crazy things on the field that are not in the playbook. And that is a very, like you said, it's impossible to win the job on the practice field that way. So what do you do? It's a tremendous question, but to me, coach-wise, it's going to be Daggy. In my opinion, if Daggy starts slow or it's just going away in Kansas State, you have to make that switch in that game and let Garrett Greene try to win that game for you.
Yeah.
See what he can do.
And honestly, and I'll admit this, I think you said the same. I would have went to Greene probably after the Texas Tech game. I think I actually said it on the air.
I probably would have as well.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, if you do that, maybe you don't beat Iowa State. Maybe you're not in a 4-win situation where you can get into a bowl game. And obviously Neil Brown is, I'm sure, going to say, and whether he says this or not, this is the case. I'm sure Shane Lyons would feel this way. Obviously, a program like West Virginia, a bowl game is better than not a bowl game. It's money. It's on TV. It's help recruiting. It helps everyone's prestige.
No question.
Absolutely. A 6-win season with a bowl game is better than a 5-win season not making a bowl game. And if they get to 6, it's a big enough program, they're going to get in some bowl game with that fan base and the ratings they would bring. So they want that. They do want it. It would also feel more like you're at least in neutral rather than, even if you're not climbing, you're at least in neutral instead of falling, because last year was a bowl game. Last year was a bowl win, which again is probably why this is somewhat of a disappointing season, because last year was a legit bowl win in a pandemic season over a pretty good team in Army. And even for Neil Brown's cause of his own career, if he goes into year 4 with only 1 bowl game, even though the cupboard was bare and nobody was really holding anything against them in year 1, that does look worse than 2 bowl game appearances overall. So yeah, they're going to want to do it. And obviously the best option to get in that bowl game is Daggy. I think everyone agrees with that, but it is a weird scenario because, again, they even said in the broadcast that Garrett Greene could maybe catch defenses off guard. It almost feels like maybe the better thing to try to even get wins might even be what I think that's a compromise, because we know he's going to start Daggy. They have the personal relationship. I don't think Neil Brown even wants to end Daggy's career, etc. They know each other from when he was 12 years old, as we hear that every game too. Is that maybe you start Daggy, you see what happens, and then even if Daggy's your starter, even if you totally get blown out next week, if Daggy has to be your starter because you don't feel Garrett Greene can either learn the playbook or be enough of a passer to start these games, so even if it's a worse effort than this, he's your starter the rest of the year, you got to see more from Garrett Greene. I would at least like to see more from Garrett Greene, certainly in the second half of these games. If they're trailing, try to catch the defense off guard. The defense could not scheme for Garrett Greene. So if Garrett Greene was in there in the second half, they wouldn't have been ready for it. And also see a little bit more with him as a passer. I think 1, 2, 3, 4 pass attempts that are just basically dumpers that aren't really pass plays, that doesn't teach you anything either. That doesn't show you anything either. I'd like a pass play that actually is legitimately a pass play called for Greene to see what can happen. And if after a couple of times it looks like, ooh, he really can't throw unless it's totally when the defense collapses, then it really brings up a question for next year. And it probably maybe you beg Daggy to come back as your bridge for the future. But we got to at least see it. So, Chris, I do want to ask you then, as a long supporter of this program, obviously you're still watching this program closely, and we just detailed Neil Brown going into year 4 next year, the fact that this is a lesser season than last year in the quarterback position being in flux, Lady Brown likely gone after this year, a lot of question marks around this program. Where are you in terms of trusting this climb? Because again, Neil Brown is a guy that everyone loves, The media, fans, everyone loves him. He even ushered in a lot of former alums back to the program that admitted, I've had some admit to me personally off the record, they didn't feel welcome the last few years. But we're also in a business that has to be about success with wins and losses at some point. And there's just not enough W's right now on the board. But where are you with that?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, that showed last week. There was 40,000 people in the stands. And I know the weather was bad, but let's be honest. Like if that team had beaten Oklahoma and had beaten Texas Tech and was rolling, and that stadium last week in bad weather would be packed. That is a direct, hit on what this coaching staff and football team are doing. Much better, obviously, today, which was great to see, and gorgeous day. And obviously the whole Major Harris retiring his number.
Yeah.
About time, obviously.
Yeah,
but
it was a bit overdue. Correct. Yeah.
I mean, I understand they used to have it's like the Red Sox were the same way. You had to be like this, and this, and be in the Hall of Fame. And it's ridiculous. No, I mean, if there's a legend at your school, you retire their number. I mean, so I'm glad they finally did. So great. Congratulations to Major.
Yeah.
Long overdue. But no, I always say this. I don't think it's ever a good idea to have like a tagline for when you roll in, because if it's not working, people are going to bury it. And right now, no one is climbing, or no one is certainly trusting this climb. And I like Neil Brown too. Seems like a really personal guy. I think he does a good job in press conferences. He seems like a pretty honest dude. He seems like someone who's probably really good at talking to donors and like you said, with the media, seems to have a nice respect for him.
Right.
But that's all well and good, but he's going to feel the pressure next year, Mike, especially if this is a team that doesn't get to a bowl game, where let's say they go 6-6, they sneak into a bowl game and have a pretty bad game against like an NC State or something, right? Just something because that's what the good thing about last year is, and you said it, they beat Army. They came back and they beat Army, right? They won the game.
Right.
Because if you don't win that game, who cares? Like, people are going to talk about, well, you lost to Army in a bowl game, and Army's a pretty good team, sure, but you still lost to Army in a bowl game. And that was a big factor for Neil and this team going into the offseason last year. But of course, let's not forget, though, it was Austin Kendall who saved his team in that second half. So I wonder if that was kind of an omen going into this year. But no, there's going to be pressure. There will be pressure from day one. He has another good recruiting class. It's another thing you can say about this coaching staff. It seems like they've got the word out about this school. They're bringing in quality players. The question is, you got to be able to put it together. I mean, look at this defense. This defense loaded with talent. Tons of players have stepped in. You've had numerous injuries in the secondary. Guys have stepped right in and have made big plays time and time again. That front, I mean, that front. I mean, we talked about Oklahoma State's front. What about West Virginia's front? I mean, Dante Stills is finally having the year that everyone expected. Like, and I know Dante was there with Dana, but I'm just simply saying, like, there's a lot. Their talent is there.
Yeah.
So the question is, like, what's off? What is not working? And when you look at those kind of things, Mike, it's going to fall on the coaching staff.
It has to eventually. And yeah, when you say you're going to trust the climb, you do have to literally be climbing. And from year one, which was nothing, you're climbing. And then, oh, wow, you're winning a bowl game against a solid program. That's really a climb. And then it does feel like this year has been, well, one hand on the mountain. No, it's falling off. You see some dust falling down. Oh, no, now we're climbing again. And then now you just completely feel like you're deflated in disarray right now. And again, Neil Brown has basically won every way you can, except for enough games on the field. He does now have at least a big game victory with Iowa State, but now they're not ranked. The Virginia Tech win doesn't look nearly as good as it did at the time, since they have just been awful pretty much ever since they left Morgantown. They have just been awful. So again, you're looking at his best performances in terms of stats against non-FPS competition. That's just rough when that's the case right now. And you're going into year 4. So it is certainly fair to say you do need a few years to bring your players in there. And Neil Brown, to some surprise, because I don't think he was really known for this at Troy, despite being known for a great play caller. He has been a great recruiter. This is a top 20 recruiting class coming in. It is kind of weird, though. You figure if he's a great play caller and now he can add the recruiting, it should be better. It feels like some play calling isn't there. He has the trust of the athletic program. Shane Lyons and him are in lockstep. I've heard.
No, he'll get his opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's gonna have his opportunity.
He's gonna have his opportunity. It's Shane's guy. Like, this was Shane's pick, so
right.
He's gonna get his shot. Like, I wonder what the play calling kind of situation will be moving forward. I mean, obviously with him and Gerard and whatever else the direction they might be looking at, but they got to figure out this offense, man. Like, this offense is an absolute nightmare to watch most weeks.
And I think the problem is too, especially after last year, this is a veteran team. Next year, we have no idea who's going to be in any skill position, really. That's the line, certainly defensively. If he would have got them into a decent bowl game, maybe won 7 or 8 games this year, which easily could have happened if he swung a couple of these games, and then next year was awful, he could have sold the bill of goods by saying, well, our cupboard was bare. We need to rebuild again because everyone graduated or left.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that's true, you can't sell that if this is an underachieving season. He can't sit there and say, well, year 5 or 6, just not about wins yet. He totally has the trust. He will definitely be back. He's not yet in a hot seat, but eventually you got us to have the wins, even if it's unfair. I mean, eventually you do have to have the wins. Of course, Shane Lyons doesn't want that to happen. But the day he fires Neil Brown, I think will be a bad day for the program, certainly with the hype and what the thought was when he came in. We will see. A lot of questions certainly around this team here. Just quickly, what do you want to see from the Kansas State game? That's the next opponent. That's a winnable game, but it's certainly a losable game too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Like, they can't overlook any game at all. If they overlook Kansas, they might lose that game. I would say no. I think what you're looking for is you want to get back to being, overpowering physical, find a way to run the football. If Daigie's starting, which I assume he is, you need to get Jarrett Daigie some confidence back. You got to show him that tape and be like, dude, why aren't you pulling the trigger here on some of these passes? And you got to figure out, you got to find that confidence, because it was there against Iowa State. It was there mostly against TCU as well. Like, he had a good couple weeks here. It was the best couple weeks we've seen. Like you mentioned, it was the best couple of weeks, not only for Neil Brown, but also for Jarrett Daigie in a West Virginia uniform. So that, that's what they have to find that intermediate passing game again, find the things that work. And, if you get those, they'll have a great shot to beat Kansas State. Defensively, same thing, man. Just keep showing us the effort they are. I know they're banged up. I'm sure they're demoralized after a game like this, with that kind of performance, but they know how good they are, and they trust this team. So we'll see.
Yeah, we definitely will see. And West Virginia had some recent big wins, which put them in bowl position, but we will see what they do the rest of the way. They do need to win 2 out of the next 3 in order to get that bowl victory. Daigie had looked good recently, but again, not so much today. Maybe you do kind of throw the tape away. Who knows? Neil Brown is certainly going to coach him up. And I will say, because of the Iowa State win, it would be hard for anyone to argue this team is no longer playing for Neil Brown. They clearly do like him. They are playing for him. They want to win for him. That was evident last week with the jumping up and down in a champagne bath after beating a ranked team. Granted, it is deflating when you turn around and do this. Maybe they were 2 up. Who knows here? Chris Sedenka, as you did mention, you're a Heisman voter still. Can you give me quickly any Heisman favorite for you? I don't need to have your vote right now, but
it's fun. I will say I'll say there are a couple players that I've really enjoyed so far this year, and they both lost today. And I thought Sam Hartman has had just a fantastic season. Threw another 5 touchdowns today.
The numbers were there. Right?
I will say he did throw an absolute breaker of an interception. They were up 14 with about 10 minutes to go. UNC scores. Assuming play, he throws a pick. UNC scores again, and all momentum gone. Those are the kind of things that, that's when you start wondering as a Heisman voter, like, oh, was that his moment to potentially do it? But we'll see. There's still plenty to go. Obviously, Young has been outstanding. CJ Stroud, everyone forgot about him, but he has put together just an absolutely, stellar year. Who else was that? Walker, who they lost today, or they are losing still, I think. But whatever. I mean,
they lost. They did end up.
They did. Okay. I mean, Michigan State's going to lose some games, but the season he's putting together it's just another one of those epic Michigan State like running back seasons. This is the most wide open. Obviously Matt Corral's another one. This is the most wide open the Heisman's been since I've been a voter. I've been a voter for about 7-8 years now. So it's really, really fun to watch, because everyone's last year, most voters were locked into one of the 3 Alabama players pretty early. It was like, which one are we going to go with? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, this field's so wide open that there were some arguing that after literally a game and a half of football, I saw some voters saying Caleb Williams is their favorite. It's like,
that's insane. Yeah.
Lord, that man hasn't played 3 games. And of course, at the end of the year, he's going to have half a season of body work if they would go undefeated. Maybe.
I saw the Heisman moment Kansas game. Like, no, wait, first off, you're playing Kansas, dude. Come on.
You're playing Kansas, yeah.
Secondly, it was like his second game as a pro or third game as a pro. I mean, come on, excuse me. Well, I guess technically as a pro now, but
now, yeah, right.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, how much of a slap in the face is that to the guys who are going to end up playing 12, 13 games this year? I mean, I love this. This kid is unbelievable. I'm glad that WVU didn't have to face him this year, but he's, I think people are going to slow down a little bit with him.
Yeah, not only that, I do think, though, this is, and I don't have a Heisman vote yet, but I do think that this is one of those years that an RG3, he lost 3 times in the year he won the Heisman. Yep. Marcus Ware, he had a couple losses. This is one of those years that you're going to have probably a Heisman winner with at least 2 losses. It's certainly one, definitely. You have some undefeated teams, sure, but they don't seem to have that individual player. So this does seem to be a year where you could easily have a Heisman winner with 2 or 3 losses because they are our flagship. I am covering from Pittsburgh, and this is Pittsburgh Sports Live. I do want to ask you, because he also did have a candidacy for a while, then had a hiccup. He's somebody, the stats are really gaudy, but has a couple losses, including one really bad one. Do you feel Kenny Pickett is a legitimate candidate for you? Have you had to think about him? Will you consider him? Because you're talking about losses. He had 6 touchdowns in the game they lost to Western Michigan. That's the defense losing.
I got a text from a really good friend of mine from high school who went to Pitt.
Yeah.
And he goes, are you able to put your bias aside? Yeah. And I was like, of course, man. Yeah. Listen, I hate the school. The players are great. Come on. Like, who didn't love watching Larry Fitzgerald tear it up? Like, absolutely. No, I think Kenny's been great. I think even if you put the Heisman aside for Kenny, I think what's best for him is that he's really shown out for NFL scouts this year. I think his NFL value has skyrocketed, especially with other guys not having great seasons. Like he's really stood out from a pro perspective. So even if, let's say, that falls down a little bit or he doesn't get the support because Pitt, it's not the biggest program. And like you said, they have lost a couple games now. He's still had a tremendous season and he's going to benefit from it. No doubt. But yeah, he is absolutely still in the mix to get the Heisman.
Yeah, and I think that was honestly the most insulting thing that prior to the Miami game. So he only had 1 loss. He threw 6 touchdowns in that loss. He had the stats that were better than everybody else. At that point, when people were saying they were going to vote Caleb Williams over Pickett, that was a little bit of a slap in the face to the situation. That didn't seem to me a fair situation because at that point, the stats were so far away. And you're talking about a guy who started the year as a backup. It would be interesting if Pickett could at least end up as a finalist based on how this year would finish. You mentioned Larry Fitzgerald. He didn't for Pitt. He didn't. Pitt fans still tell us, the comments still say they feel it was an incredible disrespect that Larry Fitzgerald didn't get.
No question.
Than he got.
And I totally agree.
And that was because the team just wasn't good. At the very least, this is at least a good Pitt team, even though they have a couple losses. We'll see what they do. If they win the conference, that certainly helps them since a lot of these other.
But like if Kenneth Walker runs for like 1,800 yards or something, like
and
that has to be
State,
that has to be recognized. Like that has to be talked about, and that's a team that could end up with 2-3 losses. Like he has been tremendous. So it's awesome. It really is, Mike. This is the most fun I've had as a Heisman voter this year at watching all these great performances. And I mean, heck, it could go to an Ole Miss quarterback here. You never know.
You never know. And this is also
Corral.
This is the thing, Chris, too. And I'm sure our fans will let you know here in the comments after we post this that every vote's going to count this year.
That's right.
There's no unanimous vote here. So that is why people are going to get more upset and look at these. A guy plays 1 game and all of a sudden he's your leader versus someone else who's leading in stats. You're going to have people saying that it's not, you're maybe looking too much for some voters into what the team does, because you do have scenarios where somebody like Pickett against Western Michigan, or even in the situation with Wake Forest. When you throw 50 points up and you're an offensive player, you can't play defense. So how is that your fault if the team loses? But hey, that's how it goes. So this is going to be very, very interesting. I do appreciate the time, man. Unfortunately, there's no WVU player that's going to get a vote from you this year. If it does, you might lose your Heisman
One of
vote.
these years. One of these years.
One of these years. Yeah, one of these years. The Will Grier thing didn't turn out to being relevant either, but that was a hype machine that almost
it was there for a bit.
It was there for a bit here. Chris Sedenka, 96.3 in Portland, Maine. He does have a Heisman vote and also a WVU alum. Chris, I gave
Tavon a third place vote.
Okay. Yeah,
there
and that's
go.
one.
That's
one that you're
that looking
was
at legit.
Stats. You're looking at stats. You're looking at stats there.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think you got to look at if somebody's stats are just so gaudy, and that for a while that was the case with Pickett.
Yeah.
That certainly was the case with Devon Austin. You do have to look for it. It is unfortunate if the other side of the ball would basically cost someone some individual accolades, but nonetheless, yeah, there are some players that are going to get chances at the pro level that I don't think anyone would have dreamed that being the case even a year ago. So there's going to be some money made. There might not be a household name for the national fan base that wins this award. Maybe it won't be at a big program. You're going to actually have to watch these games, Chris.
That's
right. To really fairly.
Oh, I'll keep watching. Don't worry.
Absolutely. And I'm imagining you're going to keep watching WVU as well. We'll see if you get to enjoy yourself, though. The rest
wins or losses doesn't matter. It's my love.
Absolutely. Chris, I definitely appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, man. It's a lot of fun. Take care.
Chris Sedenka of 96.3 in Portland, Maine. He is a WVU alum. He is a U92 WVU FM alum of myself, college radio at West Virginia University. And he is a Heisman voter. So Pitt fans, Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now. He right now isn't leaning Pickett as his favorite, but he absolutely admitted that he legitimately considering Pickett. Pickett could still win it for him. It sounds like he would at least put Pickett in there as a finalist. And he's not necessarily somebody that's just going to throw that guy away strictly because they're not winning a game, especially if it's not their fault based on the other side of the football taking that L. So that's interesting. Chris Sedenka is a Heisman voter. That's certainly a big deal here this year. It is a wide open field to say the very, very least, and it's almost a guarantee. The winner in terms of individual great players, they are not on undefeated teams. There are undefeated teams. They aren't really on them. The players getting those accolades are players that have already lost games, whether it's their fault or not. So it will be interesting. We've seen guys lose games and win the award in the past, but generally that's a really promoted player that you think is a number one draft pick in the future. I don't know if anybody fits that bill either, but of course Pickett is soaring. Back though to West Virginia, which does not have a Heisman candidate this year. The Mountaineers did lose 24-6 to Oklahoma State, who now ascends themselves, I'd imagine, into the top 10 based on what's gone on throughout the rest of the country. Neil Brown got to answer some questions. We might need to see more Garrett Greene. This team still has a chance at a bowl game. That certainly is still something this program wants, but it's not been pretty. That bowl game is not even guaranteed by any means. Jared Deggy, after 2 great games, needs to be way better. He certainly wasn't good enough. The defense maybe was better than it looks, but a lot of questions still need answers. Is this program climbing? It doesn't appear they really, really are. It does appear there's a large gap from where the climb maybe should be at this point. We will see. Chris Sedenka there, joining me 96.3 in Portland, Maine. I appreciate the time. Glad to talk to him as well. It's been a while since I talked with him. And the Mountaineers, they got to turn things around. A lot needs turned around as West Virginia heads into a game against Kansas State. 3 games left, 4 wins. They need 2 more to even get a bowl game and get a postseason. What's the strategy? What are they playing